Welcome home, prisoner 24601. Get comfy. You're gonna be here a while. So, what are you in for? Me? I stole love for bread. No one's gonna get that reference. Hello and welcome back to Penguin's Horror Extravaganza. Today we'll be taking a look at a game from the PlayStation 2 era. A game that tried to mix horror with action. A game that ended up having a bit of a cult following. A little game called The Suffering.
Hear ye, hear ye. This is Radio Free Abbot. The inmates are running the show.
Developed by Surreal Studios and published by Midway Games, Surreal Studios was founded in 1995 by Alan Portmore, Stuart Denman, Nick Radovic, and Mike Nichols. Surreal had worked on a few projects like Draken: The Order of the Flame and its sequel, Draken: The Ancient Skates, even working on the Lord of the Rings: The Fellowship of the Rings game, also going as far as to make the Riot Engine to use in their future projects. The basic idea of The Suffering was the action of Devil May Cry meets the horror of Resident Evil and the immersive world of Half-Life. The game design came from Richard Rouse III's cancelled role-playing game Gunslinger. One of the ideas in Gunslinger was to have an in-depth morality system where entire towns of NPCs would react to players' actions. However, it would have been deemed impossible to properly implement. The idea was shrunk down and a simpler AI was used in the making of The Suffering. To gain some inspiration for the game design team turned to the world of horror films, one of those films being Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. In the early stages, it was decided to have The Suffering have a more focus on action than horror. Creature design was a very important component. Richard Rouse III, the writer and lead designer for The Suffering, stated, "From the beginning, we wanted to stay away from zombies and the more tired horror cliches that everyone had enough of. We wanted to move on to something more disturbing and more unique to this experience." Each creature had a design that tied back to different execution methods used in Carnate Island. The initial creature designs were sent to Stan Winston Studios, where Terry Goldfinger, an artist working at the studio, would look over and add to the designs. In an interview, Winston says he jumped at a chance to work on a horror game. Stan Winston, for those that don't know, is a special effects artist that had his hands in several projects including Gargoyles, The Wiz, The Thing, Terminator, Ghoulies, Aliens, The Monster Squad, Predator, Pumpkinhead, Edward Scissorhands, Predator 2, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, Interview with the Vampire, Small Soldiers, End of Days, Galaxy Quest, Darkness Falls, and Constantine. That's just some of them. As stated by Terry Wolfinger, the important thing to me is that the game is scary and the creatures are unsettling. The Suffering is a brilliantly simple concept. The man is on death row and creatures are unleashed in a prison environment. It's a great concept for a game. One of the key elements of The Suffering was something that Rouse referred to as player empowerment. This idea tied back to the morality system that was to be implemented into the project. This gave the players the freedom to decide the guilt or innocence of Torque through their actions in-game. And it was through said actions that players not only decide Torque's future, but also his past actions. One of the original ideas for gameplay was to have a lock-on mechanic, in the same vein as games like Siphon Filter and Devil May Cry. However, the team felt it didn't fit with the overall feel of the game, as the core gameplay was more in line with PC shooters, which used mouse and keyboard controls, which lent itself towards ease of aiming. And with the successful releases of console games such as Max Payne and Halo, both of which lacked the lock-on function, led the team to scrap the mechanic. The Suffering had been unofficially revealed on May 17, 2003, when Midway Games sent a list of their upcoming projects to retailers. The game was originally planned for October 2003 release. However, in September, Midway announced that the game would be pushed back to early 2004. This wasn't due to the game being incomplete. In fact, it was to make sure that the game was in top form. The extra time let the team check and recheck the game several times. There was a GameCube port of the game planned, but the team wanted to focus on the Xbox and PlayStation 2 versions. One of the interesting little tidbits was that Midway hosted a promotional event in the West Virginia State Penitentiary, a notorious prison that was closed back in 1995 and is considered to be haunted. At the event, game journalists spent a night in the haunted prison. A demo was also presented for those attending the event. The music was an interesting undertaking as well. The game's composer, Eric Aho, had made the score by getting sounds from striking metal bars, slamming a dumpster against the wall, scraping metal, breaking rocks, even using arcing electricity. Reception for The Suffering was mostly positive, having a 77 on Metacritic. The Suffering was released for PlayStation 2 and Xbox on March 8, 2004 in North America, and on May 14, 2004 in Europe. It was also released on Windows June 7, 2004 in North America and July 30, 2004 in Europe. And with that, let's take a look at today's game.
When you escort an inmate to death row, you know he's scheduled to get what he deserves.
Ernesto, you can really be...
Torque is a man who lost everything. After being convicted for the murder of his wife and children, he is put on death row as a result. But soon after his arrival to Abbot State Penitentiary, things start to go bananas when strange creatures begin to attack the prison. Now Torque must fight his way to freedom and maybe uncover some of the horrible secrets lurking on Carnate Island. The Suffering is a third-person action horror game. The main focus here is combat, where in other games of this genre, the main character will be running around enemy-filled environments with very little in the way of both health and ammo. But here, Torque is almost always stocked with supplies. However, this does actually fit with the overall feeling of the game. Torque does have a bit of an arsenal at his disposal to fight back the hordes on Carnate Island. There's a shiv and fire axe for melee weapons. As for firearms, there is a revolver, a Tommy gun, and a shotgun. There are also some throwable weapons. There's a Molotov, a grenade, a flash grenade, and dynamite. But that's not the only trick up Torque's sleeve. Torque has the ability to transform into a powerful creature to aid in combat. As a creature, Torque's attacks deal out massive damage, making it helpful for some of the more tougher encounters. The thing to note is Torque can't stay in this form for too long, as doing so will start to hurt him, so keep that in mind. One of the other cool things about the Suffering is that the player can seamlessly switch between first and third person with the push of a button. There are choices that happen at certain points of the story. These choices change Torque's appearance. They also change the way other characters react to Torque. It also affects the ending of the game as well as the beginning, as they determine how guilty or innocent Torque is. Not only that, but they even determine how effective healing items are, which was a pretty nice touch. There are a couple of cast of characters Torque will meet on his journey across the island. Not only that, but the enemies are interesting as well. There's the Slayer, an enemy that has blades for limbs. They're fast and deadly. There's the Marksman, a large enemy with rifles attached to their back. They can attack from a distance. There's the Mainliner. This little critter tends to jump and attach itself to Torque to deal damage. There's the Nooseman. This one will hang around and wait for Torque to walk into their trap. There's the Burrower. These bastards will hide in the ground and pop up to attack with their chains. There's Fester. This big chunky boy is a bit of a bullet sponge and will hit hard. They can release a horde of exploding rats that will lock onto Torque. However, they can be dealt with pretty easily with Molotovs, or a few fire axe hits if you're nasty. There's Inferna, a fiery enemy that flies around, lighting the area ablaze. They will also send out a powerful explosion that deals decent damage. As stated before, each enemy type was to resemble a different execution method used. There was also some light platforming and puzzle solving. They were pretty simple to do. There are some side areas that players can find that will lead to some extra supplies, so a useful thing to keep an eye out for. As far as bosses, they weren't too bad, not too challenging on that front. Some of them did require a bit more than shooting. Overall, they weren't horrible.
We may hate each other, we may die anyway, but we will kill more of these putas together than alone.
The Suffering doesn't look too bad for a PS2 game. The sound design was spot on and gave off the perfect amount of creepiness. The game is set in a dingy prison, so the color palette is a bit more on the darker side, but it does work overall. And there were a bit of variety on the island when it comes to levels. The music was fantastic, kicking in when the action was ramping up. The little sounds that occurred just while walking around the prison added to the atmosphere. The voice work from the supporting cast was well done as well. I did encounter a few glitches during my run, mostly graphical, but there was one where an NPC I was supposed to be escorted stopped walking and wouldn't continue forward, making me restart at an earlier checkpoint. There was also one where the game locked up, forcing me to reboot my system, and there was one where I spawned midair and fell to my death. But other than that, the game ran fine.
Truly understand, but with the capabilities of my experimental device...
So all in all, is this a game you should go out and play? I'd say yes, a definite hard yes. The atmosphere for the entire game was fantastic. I was a big fan of the enemy design. They did remind me of the Cenobites from the Hellraiser franchise. The gameplay was pretty fun too. There were very few parts where I got frustrated with the established game loop, mainly where I was facing enemies with little to no health. There were times where I simply ran past encounters, but those were mainly on the levels that were filler levels, which on that point, I wasn't a fan of these levels as they only lasted a few minutes if even that. It just felt like a wee bit of a waste. Some of the escort missions were a pain in the ass as well, but overall I enjoyed my experience. There is a PC port available on GOG for little cost, but it does have some issues with it. But if you want to go PC for it, that would be the way to go. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a prison to escape from.
You know how to kill.
Hey, welcome to the end of the video. I thank you for making it this far. So I've been gone for a good minute, but I'm back, so better late than ever I guess. I do plan on doing more horror games for the spookiest of months, so keep an eye out for that. The next game will be a game I have fond memories of, and apparently is stupid expensive. But until then, you know what to do, spread the awesome, and I will see you next time.